Is it letting me? So I am so excited to introduce Claudia.
It said it was in progress.
Yes, it is in progress. Can you hear? Okay. I am so excited to introduce Claudia MacMillan and Onyema Nweze. And these two beautiful queens, my dear sisters in this classical family, are doing great work in the Dallas, Texas area with bringing as much of the classical tradition as they can into that independent school district. And I'm going to let each of you all just tell a little bit about yourself, your background, and then you kick it off. So we'll start off with Claudia. Can you hear me, Claudia? You can go ahead and give some background. Did she freeze? Oh, no. Can everyone hear me?
Thank you. Yes, you were breaking up a little bit,
Okay.
Dr. Prather, so I'm not sure. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Shoot.
She's frozen, I think.
Okay, she's frozen as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how unfortunate.
Okay,
are
we here?
Are you back?
Yes, I am, but you will keep going. You can keep going.
Okay, we keep going.
Yep.
Well, we are so delighted to be here with you, Dr. Prather. I'm trying to find my notes here. First of all, thank you for your vision and your stamina to host this event. And thank you for inviting me and my colleague, Dr. Onyema Nweze, to this distinguished conference, this conversation. Invite us to share a few words about our work in the MacMillan Institute, a nonprofit that we serve. We're so proud to be a part of this conversation because redefining the classics is actually at the very heart of what we do. I'm going to speak very briefly for a few minutes with some remarks about the work of the MacMillan Institute, and then Onyema is going to follow me with some of the findings from her dissertation because it's research that is directly related to this conversation today and to the work that we do at the MacMillan Institute. I am Claudia MacMillan. I'm executive director of the MacMillan Institute, but I am here today because my life was transformed in 1989 by the classics. That summer, I attended an intensive, immersive literature course taught for high school teachers conceived by my teacher, Dr. Louise Cowan. Now, I wouldn't remark about my own transformation were it not representative of the responses from 40 years now of alumni from these classes. The way that we read through the lens, speaking of lenses, Ashley, the way that we read through the lens of Dr. Cowan's literary genre theory, the spirit of liberal learning in which we gather and apply ourselves to the good human work of our own soul building, reawakens our hearts and minds for the human purposes of education that have been in many places, in many ways lost, those things that transform us into lifelong learners. So again, I'm speaking about the work of the MacMillan Institute as Dr. Prather asked me to. Our work is an extension of the work that Drs. Louise and Donald Cowan conceived and lived. And I can say with absolutely no exaggeration of terms, the Cowans began redefining the classics more than 70 years ago in their own work at the University of Dallas. They believed in the transformative power of liberal education. They believed in the power of the study of classic works from all the disciplines, the best from every discipline, to change how one lives in the world, not simply to inform and adorn one's intellectual achievements. Speaking of Mortimer Adler, Anika, in 1981, the Cowans joined their colleagues, Jacques Barzun and Mortimer Adler, in their focus on building up the public school system. Donald Cowan took to heart the logic of Aristotle's statements in Book 8 of the Politics about regimes educating citizens for their needs. And in the case of democracy and other representative forms of government, as we all know, this means liberal education based in the classics. what Aristotle called first, I believe, public education. He invented the phrase, everyone must provide at public expense the same kind of education, what Ashley was just talking about, liberal arts foundation, so that everyone has a common thread and a common story that includes all stories in which to build community. As we all know, the American experiment was conceived on the foundation of this ideal, filtered through the Enlightenment lens on a much broader scale, as only we moderns could conceive. However, we have never applied Aristotle's principle. We've never even attempted to give all our children in America a liberal education. We've ill-equipped ourselves to live in the freedoms that democracy provide, and the evidence for this neglect is painfully apparent at all levels of society at large. And I think that this is where the great conversation about redefining the classics must begin. We in our institution have taken this to heart. In Cowan-inspired courses and programs, we work to inspire and equip public school educators, from classroom teachers to superintendents, to provide all children with a liberal education that readies them for individual fulfillment and for meaningful participation in democracy's communities, which is based on the ongoing human conversation, the good human work. We have an academy model, we have an integrated history English, a humanities curriculum that's based on world classics, old and new. It's been proven in public schools in Dallas and Fort Worth. Onyema is going to share a bit more about this in her remarks, but these courses have shown what you just said, Anika and Ashley both, that all children are hungry for substance. They want to encounter real things in their studies, and we're the ones who deprive them of that. So children from neighborhood schools respond to the same. We have found this, we have the data to prove this, we have the anecdotes to prove this. They respond to the same high quality classics-based curriculum that children experience in the best private schools. So I'll throw this in. We are redefining the classics by insisting that they are the birthright of every child who lives in this country. All children need to be provided the opportunity to encounter the great works so that they may engage in human things, the chief of which is the conversation. They need to be taught how these images and ideas can help them shape better lives. To make this birthright reality, though, as we were just saying, Anika, I think you just said, we grown-ups who live in this country must first come to the proverbial table, and we must do this again and again. In this age of instant gratification, it's very difficult for us to think about things that don't have a completion, but we have to deny our appetites for quick solutions and commit ourselves to this ongoing critical conversation. We must consider together again and again and again what great works from around the world and throughout time we should put in front of our children to help them build their lives that are filled with meaning and purpose. I know that if we do this in the proper spirit and as often as we need, we will see that this conversation is the joy of it, not the burden. And I can do no better than to end these very brief remarks before turning the floor over to Onyema than to quote Donald Cowan in the passage I think you'll understand why I'm using. He concludes his Spirit of Liberal Learning chapter in his book called Unbinding Prometheus, Education for the Coming Age, with this: we should make no mistake. The spirit of liberal learning is marked by joy. When that joy is absent, is a sign that we ourselves have blocked the passages to insight and wisdom. We need, therefore, rather than making the opulence of the great tradition serve us to grow to the full stature demanded by its genius and power. For the liberal arts are not merely a received tradition from the world's past, but fully as much an ongoing creation toward its end, toward the fulfillment of all things. And all of us All of us are engaged in that creation, he says. We ourselves are the living manifestation of the truth that makes us free, the truth that is constantly granted to us in the process of learning. I'm going to just yield the floor to my colleague, and she's going to share some about our work.
And let me say something really quick, because I need to give Onyema a proper introduction, because my queen sister here just finished her dissertation. So I want to reintroduce Dr., if I didn't say it before, I couldn't remember, Dr. Onyema Nweze. You have the floor now, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I think I have to pick up with personally how I came to know about the MacMillan Institute. I was a teacher in Dallas ISD, and Dr. Claudia was invited to campus to talk with us, share with us about the Summer Institute. And she just started talking about some of the texts that would be covered. And I'm part nerd, so I'm like, I'm there, no problem. And so I went that year, summer of 2006, and I just left there a different person. I left there a different teacher. And I have to say, and this is not bragging, but at that time I was chair of the department. I was considered a highly effective teacher. I thought I was doing good, and I went and said, oh my gosh, I've been teaching text so wrong. I've been having them just chop it up to make sure that they would be good on that AP test or be able to pass the state test. But do my kids really love literature? I don't know. I didn't even consider it. But the way it made me feel, I knew I wanted my students to feel that. And just everything after that changed. As I began to rise in the district, reading instructional coach at the district level, academic facilitator, the higher I got, the more I felt this just isn't the way we should be treating and teaching students in the public school. So I quit. And I started working on my dissertation, or actually my doctoral program, in 2017. I quit, and I've been working on this ever since. Something happens to the teacher, and that's what I wanted to explore. And so if I may, I want to share my screen. Oh, I can't share it. I have a PowerPoint, Dr. Prather.
You should be able to, let me know, are you able to share? You should be able to share.
It says it's disabled.
Huh. Can you try it again? Now, does it work now?
Yes, it is now.
Okay,
thank
good.
you. Oh boy, I tell you, technology is the thing. So I wanted to study what happened to the teacher, what happens to us when we attend this program. And so because one of the founding, as Dr. Claudia was mentioning early, founding studies that we use in the MacMillan Institute is Dr. Donald Cowan's Unbinding Prometheus. I decided to entitle my dissertation Prometheus Unbound in the public schools. It's a phenomenological study of MacMillan certified teachers. And again, these two are the basis of our work in the MacMillan Institute. Our educational philosophy comes from Donald Cowan, Unbinding Prometheus. He talks about, as Dr. Claudia mentions, the spirit of liberal learning, education for all, but in particularly cultivating the poetic imagination within students. From Louise Cowan, we get classic text in the genre books. We use literature as that mode of knowledge. And the genre wheel in particular is that the focus. So anytime we begin to take things personally, or we're looking for the cultural, we begin to remember, look at the genre wheel. Where are we in tragedy? Where are we in the lyric world? So that we have something that continues to engage our communal focus, if you will. Here's the basis. In public schools right now, we have what we call neoliberalism controlling everything. neoliberalism equals training up a human worker because they focus on three things. Learning should be practical. It should be useful. We should make sure that they are career ready, ready for something practical. Learning means performing in a certain way to attain specific outcomes. There's something that I need to be able to see. If I don't see it, then you didn't learn it. And again, the quality of learning is assured only through measurability. What happens in an environment like that is we have competition, we have campus versus campus, students out trying to outperform each other, teachers trying to there is no community there. There's nothing greater than the immediate in that environment. And so we forget about the human. In a liberal education, as we've been talking about, one of the things that we talk about the MacMillan Institute is Cowan's 3 moments of learning. He talks about 3 moments of learning that complete the entire circle of learning, and that's grasping, mapping, and making. And the problem is in the neoliberal world, the only concern is on mapping because we have to master the objectives. Everything is about mastery. But Donald Cowan teaches us that for true learning to occur, you have to grasp and you have to make. And those, unlike what we see in this last on neoliberal, you can't measure that. But if that doesn't happen, then learning really hasn't taken place. Enhancing the personhood of the learner is the focus in liberal education. And unfortunately, that means that focus needs to be in instructional time on things that may not be measurable. That's a problem in the neoliberal world. And Dr. Claudia already read, thank you for reading that quote. The spirit of liberal learning is marked by joy. And if there's no joy, there is no insight. We've blocked it, or wisdom. Neoliberal environment doesn't have time for joy. And don't realize that if you don't put time in that, if your kids aren't enjoying, then the depth of learning that you really want them to get, they're not able to. But here's the focus for me in my dissertation. The mentor has to lead and instruct. That is what Donald Cowan, the teacher is important in that. And it just helped me remind me of Du Bois, who in talking about training the mind instead of just the hand, that a teacher is needed, a broad-minded, cultured men and women that scatter civilization among a people whose ignorance was not simply of letters, but of life itself. And I would argue that pretty much defines students in a classroom. We are not just giving them knowledge, but we want them to scatter among we want civilization to actually sprout. Democratic civilization, that's the civilization that we live in. So we have to train them in that way. But first we have to make sure the teacher has that experience. So I'm focused, my focus was on the learning experiences of the MacMillan certified teachers. That meant they did 2 things. That meant they learned with us in the MacMillan Institute. So they actually experienced a liberal learning environment, and they taught using our humanities course, which is grounded in that liberal learning in a public school setting. I had 9 participants total, and I took them through it. They did a full interview with me, at least an hour long. They participated in a focus group discussion, and I even had them do a journal write. It was funny because my professors, I would say most of them neoliberal minded, thought, oh, your participants, they just won't do all of that. You're asking too much. They were so excited to be able to share. I'm like, I don't think you understand. So 4 things emerged from the data that I collected. And the first and foremost, as we're talking about redefining classics, was the power of classic text. Now, I know, having trained, that it's not a really good practice to read to people, but some things need to be heard. In each of the quotes, I try to begin first with their experience of learning, just an example quote, and then their experience teaching. And so here for the power of classic text, one of the quotes, I thought I understood literature before, but I just didn't understand the depths and riches that I believe I understand now. That's a teacher. The teachers have to be taught. They have to experience this. And for students, the study of classics was exactly what students needed, because they needed something to grow their imaginations, something that connects them to what has been and what will always be in humanities, something to help them understand themselves and their community more. As a matter of fact, my participants actually says the classic text is the thing that could make a learning environment equitable. Because no student, really, if we think of ancient Greece or Rome, no student have any immediate connection to that. It's the distance that actually allows better for the conversation and for everybody to enter it sort of at a more equal level. I found that compelling too. The second theme, the community of learners. One of my participants, I think, speaks in both as a learner and as a teacher in this quote. The idea of teaching and learning is something that is truly communal. And it is a liberating thing because I'm not carrying, even as a teacher, I'm not carrying the full weight. Even as a school leader, I'm not carrying the full weight. I know that there's so much to be learned from the people that I'm sharing the text or the lesson. That's a community that, I'm sorry, you just can't establish in a neoliberal environment because at the end of the day, competition rules. So either they're not really sharing all, or they're sharing so much because they're looking for promotion. It's about competition and not truly learning and growing from each other and within yourself. The third theme, the transformative power of liberal learning. Through submission to the text, the conversation, the artwork, I changed who I was as a teacher. It's not about me. The work was meaningful, and within 3 or 4 months, you could see that there was already a huge transition, and that's within the students that they were teaching. They were becoming more confident readers, more compassionate people. That's key. We can't ignore that. And the last theme, the power of the imagination. The poetic imagination sees things as whole. As in the MacMillan Institute, we work to cultivate that poetic imagination in our teachers and then the teachers within the students. And the last quote really was from one of my participants who thought about on his campus, it's a STEM on one side and a liberal arts on the other. And so the students experience both. But he noticed that in all of the graduation speeches, some text was quoted from the humanities classes. And he began to think about the fact that those speeches really were about their future. Those texts have become a compass for them. They've oriented them forward. It's in their imagination. And so those are some of my qualitative findings in my dissertation. What I was pleased to be able to do was to link it to some data because data is key. We have to have measurability. So I wanted to show that if you stop focusing so much on mastery, that these students can actually outperform. I'm not going to go through all numbers, but just in general, the two parallel lines, that's the district and the state. This is growth on mastery because we were at a magnet school, so these are our higher achievers, so we want to see the highest level of achievement from 2018 to 2019. There was basically no growth at state or district. The other 4 lines is where we had our academies working, and you can see the growth. This one in particular, we had 9% at mastery level in 1 year, and it went all the way up to 30% in the year that we actually implemented our humanities curriculum. So we can actually improve the focus of a neoliberal environment if we actually include a liberal education. It's funny, but not funny. And then we also make sure that we want everyone to know that this is for all. This is liberal learning for all students. So we also function at a neighborhood middle school, 8th grade reading. And I broke it up by sub-pop to show this is for everybody. The dark blue, that's the state, this is the district. And you'll see that lime green that outperforms each except for one category. This is state white students. We did not perform them, but every other we outperformed. And the biggest gap we made was in special education students. All students, as we mentioned in the beginning, they're hungry for this. They're yearning for this. And if we put this in front of the students, we can really get the mastery that a neoliberal environment is looking for. I just want to end with one thing, and I know I'm probably talking too much and too long, but Dr. Prather, when you were with us in April, at the ending conversation, we were talking about that debate between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, training of the hands versus training of the minds. One of our audience members, dear Miss Woods, asked the question, that brought crickets. She said, how many of you know of a school named W.E.B. Du Bois? How many of you have heard of a Booker T. Washington? Yes. You hear Booker T. Washington schools all over the place. The training of the hands to make workers. And then she said, the real problem is capitalism. And I believe, just like anybody else, and I've said before, one of the problems in education is very similar to the healthcare field. And that's the money is in the treatment and not the cure.
Mhm.
I really believe the liberal education is the cure, and we continue to be ignored. But I can't, that just dwelled with me so much. I could not, I'm like, I've never thought about that. But I do believe that we don't have to lose to capitalism.
That's right. That's right.
Because I remember the Montgomery bus boycott. Montgomery bus boycott brought capitalism to its knees.
Yeah.
But it required not just one Rosa Parks to sit and say, no, I'm not getting up. It required a community to embrace it and say no. And the beauty of that boycott is that they still traveled. They still got to their destination, but they told that system, we're not doing it that way until some things change. We need the community, but public school and many public school educators who love those kids, love them, aren't realizing that you're being satisfied with the back of the bus right now.
Yes, that's it. Yes. That, I mean, that's actually what Du Bois says in his of the Wings of Atalanta and Souls of Black Folk. We are settling for the gold apples.
Yeah.
Instead of finishing the race.
Absolutely.
And my husband and I together are reading this book called, I think, Black Education in the South from 1860 to like 19 something. I'm gonna put the link to the book. That book is amazing. It is a defense for it's first of all, it tells the history of how we lost classical education in the Black community. And it talks about the role Booker T. Washington played in taking that from us. And that our community actually wanted this education. We fought to have this education, but we at that time, the battle continues, but it seems like so far we have lost because then industrial education was introduced. And he has quotes and data to show how it was a concerted effort to keep us doing manual work. Because every time we got our hands on classical education, we began to progress politically, socially, economically, even. And this is not about, and I don't want you to think this is about Black education. It's just, it's to show how powerful this education is to revolutionizing every human being's mindset. And we think that if we teach skills and all that, and Ashley talked about that too in hers, and really connected to you all. I have witnessed this research you presented is amazing because that's what I've experienced at my school. So sometimes my students will leave my school to go to a public school, like their parents move or income that allow them to stay. And I kid you not, if they have been with me for 2 or more years, they are above, they're in AP classes. They are, like one of my students got the highest SAT score in the school, and my school isn't a testing school. We do like maybe 1 year every now and then for those who need it, but we don't do like a school-wide testing for any of our students or anything like that. And so we don't do any of that. We just sit around and talk about Socrates. And of course do math and science and all the other core subjects, but everything is through Socratic dialogue and through experience and activity and experiential learning and project-based, but our core is the seminar, the Socratic seminar. And it does, and we've had white students, Asian students, Hispanic students, Jewish students, Black students, we have all types of students, and it has the same effect every time. Let's see, are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions for the MacMillan Institute? We have like a minute. And if you think of any questions later, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A and we will address them. Yes, go ahead.
May I just say, because what you both are saying again also reminds me, our national commitment to individuality, which is part of our American DNA, this, self-determination, but we have overcommitted to individualism, and this is one of the things that has kept us from committing to the kind of education that we need across America in all of our schools that will, the ironic thing, like Onyema was just talking, if you take this spirit of liberal learning, the way we talk about it, Don Cowan gives us, you will achieve both the goals of the standards in the state schools, and you will also give them the foundation for wisdom for life. And that's the same way with individuality. We think it's an either or. And I like, Ashley said this is about both and. Through the proper study of the great works, the great conversation, we will have fulfilling individual lives, but they will be poised to participate in community. And then the conversation can happen. Then we can have conversations, but not until.
Yeah, and I love what you're doing. You said something earlier that even bringing it into a setting, maybe the school hasn't become all classical, and that I have this phrase as a church girl. I say this phrase: if we can just touch the hem of classical education's garment. So the point of that is, I have found that just bringing something in like Socratic dialogue, we may have some people listening who are in a traditional school or in a regular public school that's not classical, maybe not even open to classical, but you can, I call them the pockets. Like maybe you can have a Socratic seminar once a month, or bring them in like keep them from recess for anyone who wants to sign up. Or I always say the week before any school break, the week before spring break or Christmas break, no one really cares what you're doing, right? You can schedule a Socratic dialogue in there. And I've done that in a school I taught in quite a few years ago when my daughter was first born. And it changed everything. Like it was a traditional school that was test driven and everything was very standardized. But I found these pockets where the leadership didn't mind what I did in that moment. And I would do Socratic seminar, or I would read aloud tales from Shakespeare. And that was a kindergarten class. By the end of the year, all those students were on a second grade reading level.
Absolutely.
And even though they were in kindergarten, they were doing more. Like the first graders thought that my class was smarter than their class. And that was not, and I wasn't allowed to teach classically, but I brought in some elements and it just changed their lives. And so it really does have that powerful of effect on students. We got a couple of questions for you guys. Let's see. As a former public school, high school teacher, what I often saw were students with exceptional intellect who did not have basic skills in reading, writing, spelling, and math. How does MacMillan Institute address the need and the required time to build these basic skills in high schoolers with the need to engage deeper questions of a liberal tradition? That's an excellent question. That balance. And there's a second one. I'll let you answer that one first.
We did this in our and the most concerted work that we've done in these last 8 years since we got the trademark for the academy model is in our academies. And we've had humanities classes in four schools. And we simply addressed the skills, we wove them all together. The skills and the knowledge and the content all went together. Vocabulary quizzes came from what we were reading together in class. We would stop and diagram a sentence or a troubling phrase or clause on the board, because you really don't know what something means until you can look seriously at the structure. Great writers use syntax, they use rhetoric, rhetorical styles. All of the things are interwoven. It's not that literature is the same thing as history or the same thing as philosophy or the same thing as music theory, but we taught all of those things in conversation with one another in the classes to the students. And so one of the biggest difficulties that I found, and I've spent my entire career in private institutions, private schooling, and university and secondary schools. And one of the things that I found the largest hurdle for the public school educators to get beyond in their modes is that, as Onyema said, they were accustomed to the attack and master mode. That we do this and we have this little exit ticket at the end of class, which shows you have so-called master this thing. But in order to master something, you have to reduce it to something so tiny. We weren't satisfied to reduce their education. We wanted their education to just take them beyond anything they'd ever imagined. So we just kept emphasizing and focusing again and again and again on all of these skills. What Don Cowan says in one of his chapters, he says it would seem to be a paradox that you could take a totally useless education like a liberal education, a classics-based education, and make productive citizens and human beings about it. But he said it's rather like the paradox of losing one's life to save it. The skills and knowledge come along if you teach it in the proper sensibility. And just one more quote from Don Cowan. He says, "It is the spirit rather than subject matter that imparts the quality liberal to learning." So it's the spirit of something that helps liberate it. The classic work can lie there dead as a bag of rocks if it's taught poorly or not submitted to, not if we don't give ourselves to it. It will just sit there, and it may even do harm if it's taught improperly, because you can turn students away from great works, away from the classics, if the teachers are not themselves full and open and submissive to the work and saying, let's look at this together. And that's the spirit that will gather up all of those things. But it's not that we say that you don't have to teach the skills in every. I love diagramming. Like I'm such a diagramming nerd. We teach all of the skills, but they're just in the context of what we're studying, so they make sense. It's not some random vocabulary list out there. It's, what does this mean in this context?
Yeah,
what is this here?
I would even go as far as saying, and I'm sorry if this comes off a bit biting, but we teach the skills. We teach writing. So I would even argue that possibly you're seeing students who are really gifted intellectually, who are weak in skills, because they've gone from year to year, never truly been taught grammar and rhetoric. They're assigned it, or they're taught only for mastery for revising and editing portion of an exam. We teach it in context with the reading, with vocabulary, it's all intertwined. So students see meaning. They begin to, again, enjoy what they're being taught because they see this really makes a difference. This really means something. Mm-hmm. If it's just separate because we need to fulfill these TEKS or these standards to be prepared for this test, those skills will never really grow as they should, as they could.
And become tools. If I may just say this one more thing, Dr. Prather, about for people who may not have access to, educators who may not have access to really fulfilling, deepening experiences themselves of liberal learning. I know a lot of public school educators were not liberally educated. They went to schools of education, which did not have, as I did, which did not have a focus in liberal education in the classics. I'll say what my teacher, Dr. Louise Cowan, said that always inspired us. She said, teachers are the high priests of learning. We do not need to know everything. We just need daily to bear witness to the fact that knowing and learning matters. So it's not about encyclopedic knowledge. It's not about having everything in your possession. It's actually the opposite. It's about saying, oh my goodness, there is so much in this world to be learned and experienced and enjoyed together and struggled through together. But just to think about that as the foundation of this, as Don calls it, the spirit of liberal learning that's marked by joy. I don't have to know everything, even though I should continue learning my whole life. My job is to bear witness to that. This matters, and this can help you build your life.
We have another question. Let's see. We have another question. We have time too. Thank goodness it's not quite 10:30 yet. Another question is, Dr. Nweze, could you say more about the green line data and closing gaps? This is a good conversation. The green line data seems to show all groups coming closer together. Absolutely. And I'm not, let me just sit with that for a minute. And I'm not quite sure what I'm wondering, but it seems significant. You're absolutely right. Whoever posted that. Can you speak on that closing of the gaps? Yes.
I have to pull it up again, and I have to be honest about the fact that for me, this data was simply just to prove that we can do what the neoliberal atmosphere wants much better. I'm just gonna be honest, just have to be, that's all I wanted, was to show that what you are so focused on, a liberal education can help you do so much more if you really, really want your students to succeed. So, and I'm saying that to say, I didn't necessarily focus on how closely these sub pops are now to where they were prior. I was focusing more on where this line was as opposed to district and state data. But now that the question has been asked, I definitely do see the closing of gaps between each subpopulation, which is what we really want to see. So that's amazing to me. Again, I can't really speak any further on it because that just wasn't my intention when I put this together. My intention was to, Dr. Donald Cowan says all students can at least be on the same plane of understanding, even though you'll have some who might be a bit more acute than others, they can all flourish. And that's what I was trying to show here.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add, Dr. Nweze, what we were looking at some data yesterday with a new friend, and we were pointing out this from this same school, that when we started this academy in this one school, we started with just a cohort. One of the requirements, if you have our academy model, is that it must be open enrollment. We're not going to put kids behind a glass wall in a wing of the school and segregate them off. We're segregating intellectually and according to skills and talents, supposedly right now, just all over the map. This is what we're doing, and it's not healthy for us or for them. But so we had a large enrollment of students who were classified special ed students. And the line showed on the data that we have on that year, the line showed that our students in our classes started below where the other students at that same grade level in the school were. And that's because we had such a preponderance of English language learner students and special education students overall. And then our data showed, just from that 1 year's growth, 1 year in the class, our data showed that they exceeded the state and the district and the rest of the campus. Is that correct, Onyema, that we exceeded those, all of them? I know that our trajectory was just upward, but we started below the standard of the school.
Are you talking about the Townview data?
No, the Monig.
Monig data. Yes, we did. When the other slide that shows the line, our line chart shows that, yes.
But this really is about closing things with no attempt to close. It's just treating every child with the same quality curriculum. Don Cowan says the curriculum is the key to the solution. It must be the same for all, designed with profundity and scope that typically is reserved for the best so-called students. And so the curriculum is, like Onyema was saying, everyone given the best curriculum rises to the same plane. So we did see a lot of close in the achievement gap. In the high school where we served in Fort Worth, in 1 year they literally closed. There were no achievement gaps in the student population, and the student population was about 20% white.
So I want to verify, I've had that experience. I have not done official research, but just I'm tracking it in my own school, that students who come to me straight from the district that's in where I'm located score pretty low on testing. Now, again, I'm not a testing school and I did not expect these results. because I've grown up to dislike testing because I feel like it didn't really always show how intelligent we are, because we're teaching through the test and you can't really see a person's intelligence. So, but I began to really track it. If you come to me straight from the district, say that first year, if I assess you coming in basically to see where you are, your scores are usually pretty low. If you've been with me for a full year, your scores go up by 10 points. It's consistent. That's been consistent. If you're with me for 2 or more years, it jumps to 30 points.
Yes.
Consistently, no matter who the student is, where they're from. That is the pattern. So far. And what I recognize is classical education seems to be like a slower process. And I think that's the part that does not fit in with the model of education that we have sometimes, is to help and get these results. But once they get it, they begin to excel pretty quickly.
Yes. Yes.
But it's that initial, it's kind of like an airplane trying to take off. It seems a little rocky at first and you're trying to take off, but once you're up there, and they just kind of soar at that point.
Yes.
And this is, again, I don't want this to be a session that is critical of public schools, because we need public schools. I value public schools. You all are working in the public schools. We're merely trying to say, hey, consider this, bringing in elements, if not all elements of this philosophy, and it may help you close the achievement gap. We want this to be accessible to everyone, public, private, charter,
yes,
to have access to this amazing experience. Let me see. Oh Lord, there's a whole bunch more questions coming in. And if I don't answer them all now, I will definitely answer them throughout the day. So I don't want you to think I'm ignoring your question. There's one more question. I hope this isn't a stupid question, but what about the idea of submission to the classics to the text? Meaning, do you have advice on how to deal with individually challenging authors within classics? The way that Dr. Prather talks about her experience engaging with Jane Austen, which took a long time for her to find rewarding. My own examples would be different. There are some things in Plato that I really struggle with, but I think we all as individual teachers will run into aspects of Greek and Roman texts that we find personally difficult to engage with. Absolutely. It's kind of like when people ask me, should we teach anything from Mark Twain? And I say, absolutely. I always say yes. And you address the concerns within a conversation, but I'll let you all answer that too.
One of the ways that our teacher Louise Cowan taught us to read, it's kind of what shapes our whole philosophy, is that we don't read things to affirm what we know or to confirm our convictions.
That's good.
And I remember the first time she told us this, a bunch of English teachers, and she said, never read with your children what they can read on their own. The classics, as I said a while ago, require community. So teach your children what they cannot read on their own, what requires community. But if you approach, I saw this happening to her in her 99th year, the last time she spoke for us and participated in a seminar. I saw her changing her mind on her own genre theory.
Yeah.
That openness must first start with the teacher, as Onyema said. This is about first the educators being educated to be able to approach these works not with their agenda in mind, not with their own things. That's what keeps us from really grasping any value in works that are not like what we understand.
Yeah.
But if the work is worth itself, it will require you to, like you said earlier, Anika, to go back and back and back and back and back again.
Yes.
It's not about mining for my own preferences. I put my preferences and my opinions at the door when I'm reading works of literature, and even to some point when I'm reading works of history, because history is a work of human hands, and so it's not going to be the full story ever.
Yeah.
But it's about submission. It has to be submission to the text itself.
And I went through that. I'll end on this note. I went through that when I first went to St. John's College, and that submission is hard. But at the moment I did that, that's when I became like obsessed with this tradition. Because I came into St. John's College. Most of the time I was the only Black person in the space. I was working on my dissertation at the same time I was taking classes at St. John's, and I was dealing with racism in my the university I was attending. So I came with some defensiveness, and I remember the moment I sat in a session and made that choice to suspend that human experience for a minute, not to forget, but just to be in the text, to be present in the text. Just read it for what it's saying right there, because the rule is you should only talk from what's in the text, and to engage with people from the text. And the healing I went through, the empathy that was developed, the forgiveness that was developed in my spirit as I began to do that. And I still, eventually I was able to have meaningful relationships that created safe space to have some hard conversations from that. But a lot of times we try to have these hard conversations. It's not a safe space. The hearts are hard. People aren't really, they only want to, it's not a healthy place for these conversations. I have found that this tradition helps to kind of break up that tension.
Yes.
You know, and also to help us get into that mode of submission.
Yes.
Don Cowan teaches about the O moment. In most classrooms, you'll hear aha moment.
Yes.
Aha. But you just think about what that implies. Aha.
Yes.
Aha. And we're taught, oh,
girl, yes.
Oh.
Yes.
I don't even think I need to go any further in explaining that. Just hearing that you're in a different position, right? And so when we try to maintain that position as we're learning, as we're going, especially because for me, I still can't appreciate Othello. That is I cannot do it.
Wow.
But every time I'm exposed a little bit of here or there reading it, I try my best to remember, it hasn't worked yet, but I'm still trying.
I read Othello. I know, honestly, we're seriously going to move on now. But look, I want to say, I taught Othello to a group of about 6, 7, or 8 high school African-American boys, all about 6 feet tall. And the reason I connect to it is because what they got from it. They felt like his story was their story.
Wow.
Yeah.
They felt like
you're helping me. You're helping me.
Girl, I thought I would. That was their human experience. We spent time just talking about Othello, but they felt there's this weight that Black males carry oftentimes in the world of feeling someone's always out to sabotage them, stab them in the back, right? That they made it, and students have made that same connection with Julius Caesar as well. And so when I work with African-American males, they often make that same connection, but that's how they connected to Othello, was that. So marinate on that for a minute. Okay. Everyone brings their human experiences in conversation. I'm going to end the recording here so we can just close this session off, and we're going to get ready for Sheena. And continue to ask questions. I see them showing up. I will make sure I address any questions by the end, throughout the day.